Yeah, guys, welcome to the Afrika for Almans podcast. And for this episode number 13, I had a very nice conversation with the lovely Bukie Maphanga. And together we now present to you the extra long interview about her extra small home country of Eswatini. Very welcome to Afrika for Almans, here with episode number 13. And I have with me today now Bukie Maphanga. Did I say that correct?
Yes, you did.
Bukie, I'm never sure with the K. It's sometimes a soft K, sometimes a hard K.
Actually, it's pronounced as if it's a G. So it's like boogie,
Okay,
like the boogie man.
So Bukie, so the K is a G and the PH is a P. Interesting.
Yeah.
Two aspects of Eswatini pronunciation I've learned already. That is good. But maybe to start, maybe to give us and my audience an introduction to you. You are recording now from Ankara. That is correct, I assumed.
Yes.
And you were generously giving me a bed, and also Chandre. We stayed at your place in Ankara earlier this year. That's how we got to know in February. And I already, when I met you, I mean, you have a very extroverted and energetic nature. And I'm very happy now that we could manage to talk about your homeland, because you are not native to Ankara. You are probably more or less temporary there, I can assume. And you are from Eswatini, or formerly known Swaziland. So very welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here. I appreciate you guys having me today, and I appreciate the platform. It's a really good one.
Thank you. Already, you are coming with large credits from our mutual friend Edwin, who's also who has joined me for the Burundi episode. At this point, I also recommend it highly. And so I'm very excited. I think we are now lucky, since it's one of the most underrated and unknown places to many Germans and Europeans. So you can basically now tell me anything and people will believe us. So that is the golden opportunity now. But maybe just to give a small start, where are we located right now within the African continent?
We are located in the southern part of Africa. Yes. Basically, if you look at the map of South Africa, we're on its northeastern part. We're a very small little dot that's there. That's Swaziland.
But it's round, right? It's a very accurate circle to some extent, yeah.
And we are bordered on our northwest and southern part by South Africa, and on our eastern part by Mozambique.
Mozambique, interesting. So landlocked.
We're landlocked
in the South African region. Interesting.
Yes. So we only get to see the seas when we travel to South Africa, or when we travel to Mozambique.
Is there a lot of traveling with both neighboring countries? Is there some open border, or is it easy to access them?
It's easy to access them with respect to the SADC. We've got open border policy with the SADC region.
SADC. That's a good point. I think I haven't mentioned it before. I spoke about the ECOWAS in a past episode, a bit more detailed. But we'll keep that in mind for the politics part. That's, I think, very, very interesting. But maybe to start a bit with the geography. So from size, how much are we speaking here? What area is Eswatini in size?
It's approximately 17,300 square kilometers, approximately.
I think this is the smallest we've had so far in Afrika for Almans podcast. Congratulations for the title. Is it the smallest also in Africa? No.
Actually, it's the smallest in terms of population, because our population is about 1.3 million, if I'm not mistaken, and Gambia is actually smaller than we are in terms of surface area, but we are slightly larger than Gambia is, but smaller in terms of the number of people in the country.
Wow. I mean, there's some Chinese cities, I know, Chongqing, I think, which is itself already larger. It's crazy. I mean, 17,000 square kilometers. But it seems on the map, at least, if I look on it from a topography level. There is a lot of variety, right? An expert told me the name. It's called apparently a biodiversity, yeah, or geodiversity. Can you maybe tell us a bit about those climatic conditions in Eswatini?
Well, we're very, very small, but we have a lot of changes. We experience a lot of changes, kind of how you would if you were in any bigger country in the African continent, or even there in the northern hemisphere here in Europe. So what happens is we've got a lot of forest areas, and we also have savanna, and we also have flatland plateaus, as well as a range of mountains as well. And also, I can say, amongst hills and valleys, also there's a lot of rock as well. In fact, one of our greatest landmarks is called the Sibebe Rock, which a lot of people don't necessarily talk about, but it's the biggest rock in the continent of Africa.
Really? Wait, rock? You mean like a united rock, like a
rock, like granite?
Yeah. Huh. Okay.
Like we hold the largest rock in the whole continent. It's about maybe 1.5 kilometers high, and then it covers about 16,000 hectares.
One rock?
Yes, it's one rock. So it's actually, in terms of covering surface area, the amount of hectares it covers.
Yeah.
It's actually, maybe, if I'm not mistaken, the largest in the world. So it's a really good landmark. You should check it out.
Absolutely, yeah. Rockstar content already, yeah. Very nice. Yeah. So, you said already it's very diverse in terms of heights and climate, I assume, then as well, right? So it must be a bit more relaxed. Being already in the southern part of Africa, it must be a bit more seasonalities and these kind of things.
Yes, we do. We're a bit more diverse with our seasons. We have 4 seasons, and actually it changes. Our temperatures, they change according to the 4 main regions of the country. So we've got our high, middle, and low velds, and then we've got our mountainous Lubombo region. So actually the regions that are mountainous are the high and Lubombo region, and that's where there's a lot of rainfall that happens. So it's quite rainy there. And also the temperatures there are not, they don't get very hot. So the volatility is not that much.
It's pretty diverse for such a small area. Yeah, it's a very very unique case, I think, right?
So when you as you go down, so as you go into the middle and the low velds, that's where it gets warmer and warmer. So the low veld being the driest, and the middle veld being a mix of both the high and the low. So it's if you want to just be okay, you'll go to the middle veld. If you want to have a cool summer, you'll go to the high veld. And if you need
all without leaving the country, yeah, for such a small place, that's very luxurious.
Have to leave. You just need to leave for the seaside.
Nice, yeah, but I think is there some rivers, maybe alternatively some water access?
Yes, we do. We've got 3 of the largest rivers, which actually stretch into our bordering neighbors.
Okay.
And the biggest one is the Great Lesotho River.
Great Lesotho River.
Yes, which stretches all from from South Africa and also Mozambique, and it goes all the way down, maybe even closer to the outskirts of Lesotho, and it became our territory because we conquered it from them.
So it's strategically located between the rivers, and probably you can protect it this way very well. Just before we slide, I mean, you already made the smooth transition about conquering, but before we slide into the history, what is the population like? Is it a centralized population, or maybe also which is your place of birth? Maybe to give us an idea, what are like the urban areas, so to say?
Well, I was born in Mbabane.
Mbabane.
So I am a city girl.
So it's the capital, right? It's the largest place.
It's actually not the largest city. The largest city is actually Manzini, and it's the most populated because it's actually our industrial city. So there's a lot of, factories and a lot of business. It's like
the economic capital, you can say.
Yes, like an economic capital. Mbabane is very, diplomatic, if you may say, and we term it our executive capital because we also have a legislative one, and most of our population is actually not in the city center. So just 25% of us are city people, and most of us are in our rural, remote areas because we're in our agricultural people. We love agricultural sustenance.
With such a fertile region, I think no surprise, right?
Yes, we are a very small country, but our land is one of the most arable and fertile lands of Africa.
Chandre will be jealous, speaking of Namib desert, it's
he was actually like, I need to go get myself a piece of land.
Definitely, who needs land if it's not such prosperous as in this case? Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so we have basically like two major capitals, more political in Mbabane, and then the more economic one in Mwazi.
Do you mean Mbabane?
Mbabane, and the economic capital was Mwazi. Manzini. Okay, I was just slowly getting into the pronunciation. Okay, that's so those 1.3 million people then mostly make up the land population. Interesting. Yeah. And where would you start if you would give someone an introduction to Eswatini, or formerly Swaziland, history?
I would probably have to start from the point of the Bantu migrations.
Okay.
So that people, I guess people who are outside of Africa can pinpoint it much better if I speak about it in that way.
Yeah.
The Bantus basically migrated and found the Khoisan in the southern region.
Khoisan, we I think from our episode with Angola, Fanny talked us a bit. It's even more native to southern Africa, right? Khoisan, and then Bantu at some point came in.
Yes, and it's the reason why our languages now, which are both Nguni and Khoisan mix. This is why then we have the cliques in our in some.
It's
of
also
our
in Eswatini.
Yes, we also have cliques. We also have cliques, but our cliques are maybe lighter than Khoisan and Xhosa. We're just slightly lighter than they are.
So there's also some Khoisan ethnicity native to Eswatini.
Yes.
So it was a mix.
Yes, we're a mix of Nguni and Khoisan, basically. So what happened was that the king who founded the Swazi nation, he's called Nkonyeni III. He was actually fleeing a conflict that happened with the Zulu warriors. So, there are quite a number of stories, I think, in the southern part of Africa that you'll hear that there were people who were fleeing, King Shaka, or the Zulu kingdom, and all of that.
So it has always been a kingdom in that area. It just over time then changed a bit, or was it different in shape in the past?
In shape, actually, in the past, it was, I can say, double the size that it is now.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of colonial, how do I put it? Colonial
influences or protectorates
or maybe disadvantages that happened afterwards, because then we lost certain parts of our land. But when our kings settled in that northern eastern part, they settled there, and they conquered the clans that they found there. So that's how then they formed the Kingdom of Swaziland. So basically, the British and the Dutch, when they came to the southern part, after they colonized South Africa, that's when they actually recognized us independently as the Swazi kingdom. But their influence then kind of reduced our landmass.
But you stayed more or less independent, at least. I mean, was it colonized?
We were always recognized as an independent nation, but we were a protectorate. We were never termed a colony. We were a British protectorate. And actually, at a certain point in time, we had what they term a triumviral administrative system, where we had the British and the Dutch, and then the Swazi king running the state at some point.
Complicated.
Yeah, it was quite complicated, but yeah.
I'm sure in a monarchy things go much easier.
Well,
so what time now would you say then we are speaking of an independent, formally independent Swaziland, or I mean Eswatini now is just the name for the last year, and I think Swaziland by then was the used term, right?
Yes. We got our independence in 1968 formally.
Oh, so late.
Yes, like officially, quite late. I mean, it's about the same time that basically almost all of our neighbors were also getting their independences, so it kind of makes sense. But negotiations, I can say in 1963, it was, you could have said that's where we were gaining more of our independence, actually. But formally and officially, it was 1968, where we were now a complete sovereign nation.
And accepted by the international...
Yes, and accepted by the international community as well.
Interesting. So until that time, the protectorate was more or less under the British rule, I assume, and then also was probably involved in world wars and other things with the British. Is that correct?
Yes, mostly with the British. At first, when the Dutch and the British, had some sort of cooperative relationship, they both controlled us under South Africa as a protectorate. And then with the breakouts of the Anglo-Boer War, the first and the second Anglo-Boer War, that's where now we were mostly under British rule. So
maybe if you don't mind, because I mean, even for me, considering myself normally a history and especially African nerd, when exactly were those British Boer wars that you speak about?
The first one was in the early 1890s, if I'm not mistaken, but the second one was in 1902, which was the last one.
Okay.
Yes,
so
those were
within South Africa then, probably, right?
Yes, they were within South Africa, but we also participated in the military forces and helping. I think mostly the British side.
Unfortunately, drawn into this.
Yes.
And by that time, always the kingdom was in charge, and the kingdom was deciding, correctly. Or the king in that case.
Yes. At that time, that's how it was. Actually, I think the influence of the British administration made us at that time a sort of constitutional. We had a constitution, so we were in a sense a constitutional monarchy. The system was kind of Westminster style at that time. Especially during, the times of being a protectorate.
Yeah.
It wasn't, the years following our independence. I think probably a decade after our independence, the king who negotiated independence for us, King Sobhuza,
King
the
Sopusa.
second. He then, annulled the constitution, and he ruled by decree.
Okay.
Yes, so his son, who is the current king right now, King Mswati III, ruled by decree until 2005, actually, where the constitution was redrafted and reintroduced, because now there were quite a number of pressures within the country for reforms.
So, I mean, maybe as a naive question, but I mean, having now the privilege to speak also to a political student, but what benefits came in for the public or the population of Eswatini with the constitution being reintroduced?
Well, I guess with the reintroduction, probably I can say, the parliament now had in their legislative, we already had one, existing, but their legislative powers were very limited to basically what the king says.
Yeah.
So after the constitution was reintroduced, now we had the parliament having more powers in the making of the law, which was beneficial for us, because at parliamentary level, there are certain levels within the parliament where the public can actually choose the member of parliament. So even elections in that manner of speaking, because now the people could now vote for, say, in at least the representation of the parliament, because we don't have parties. So I mean, we should at least be able to choose the people that represent us in the ruling class. So
yeah,
in that respect, maybe I can say it helped us gain some rights.
some rights. So the way of introducing new laws and these things can be initiated now by the parliament, right? So
yes,
it's not completely up to the It's very unusual to have kingdoms in Africa still, right? Am I mistaken that it's one of the last few ones, right?
Yes, it's actually the last reigning monarchy,
The last king,
or as we say, diarchy, actually.
Diarchy, yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, what does diarchy in that sense mean?
It means that we've got, the king as the head of state, the one who is the head of the government,
Yeah.
above the prime minister. And then we have the queen mother, so his mother, the king's mother, who actually holds power in the traditional sense. So she governs the holy traditional decorum, maybe, let me put it that way.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, from my Western understanding of monarchy, we always have this concept of the king, maybe his wife as the queen having some power, most likely his son, but his mom or like moms in general are not, it's not very usual, right? It's an unusual monarchy concept.
Yes, well, I mean, with our system, because of our traditional polygamous construct in terms of the royal family, it's not really smart to have a queen, as in the wife of the king, hold power, because there's too many wives. So
yeah. I understand.
It doesn't make a lot of sense. So instead, they sort of put the power to the mother of the king instead, and the mother of the previous king actually played quite a big role, a huge role, for the independence of Swaziland, because she was queen regent for close to 2 decades. And yes, because by the time her husband, the King Nkonyeni V, passed away, King Sobhuza II was 4 months he was just a baby.
Oh, wow.
So she needed to take reign. Her name was Queen Labotsibeni, and she really ruled the country, and the laws that she had were very inclusive, and she really ruled uh, in the best interest of the people, and it also showed with her son King Sobhuza, who came afterwards and essentially won the country
Yeah.
independence off. Yeah.
That's beautiful. But is there another way that possibly a female could also become head of the royal family, or is that the only way that theoretically her son must be the next king and must be underaged?
Yes, it's the only way, because actually our heir system, the way that it goes, is
Yeah.
it's not very classical. Like, we don't
Mm.
have a first and second and third to the line sort of thing. Uh, it's been, out of all of our king's wives, there is one wife who will have only one son, and that son is the chosen one. So that's how it is.
Wait, so only the wife that has a single son will
Yes,
be the mother
just
of the new
one
king.
son. Yes, so
Ah,
no siblings, no. So this is why normally our queen mothers are quite young, and also our kings are also quite young. So we've had a number of queen regents. There was a queen regent before Labotsibeni, and then she was a queen regent, and even the queen mother, the current queen mother, was also queen regent for about 6 years, because when King Sobhuza passed on, our current king was only 12 years old.
interesting.
So they can only ascend at a particular age, uh, which is 18 or 19,
Yeah.
yes.
So in history, you will have long kings followed by like 1 decade or 1.5 decades of female leadership, and then again a long, because you will be young again, right? So a very long
Yes,
kingdom
yes.
chain.
But
Interesting.
actually, it's not all of them that have enjoyed a very long reign, because actually the longest reign was King Sobhuza, who actually reigned for about 83 years, I think. So
83 years. Wow.
yeah, that's a very
That's
long
crazy.
time. Yeah, so he's the longest reigning king, and his mother was the longest reigning
Mm.
queen regent. So I guess they were really the chosen ones, I guess, if you may put it that way.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, let's see. I guess. I mean, if things go as they are, we might see some more royal family members to come. Yeah, it's probably,
Yes.
from my perception at least, it didn't look like it's going to change anytime soon. Or I don't want you to force you into controversial opinions here, but
Well, I don't think it will change anytime soon, but it's not like there haven't been certain movements towards a change, sort of, I mean, the global narrative nowadays is that we need to follow a liberal democratic system. So we have certain, unions, labor unions,
okay.
especially maybe student associations, actually, that have been quite influential, and they are lobbying for, a republic, or if not a republic, a more inclusive system, where at least there should be parties, and those type of things.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Is it in that way maybe similar to South Africa, where not the part of monarchy, but maybe the concept of having a very vivid and active youth in terms of politics, where I mean I just noticed it on the elections earlier this year, how much like even the young people also are included and engaged, and
Hmm.
how much ambition comes from the youth, while for many European countries, unfortunately, the focus of elections and the majority of interest in elections is a very, very retired age group, unfortunately. Yeah.
Well, actually, when we look at it this way, I mean, most of the Swazi population is a young population.
Okay.
We're actually quite young. Our life expectancy is unfortunately really bad. So we have a very large young population who they are, in a sense, trying to instigate change within our system. Most of the labor unions and especially the student associations, are, it's all young people who are trying to, get transparency in the country and fight for democracy. But unfortunately, when we look at our ruling class, we don't have, or even members of parliament, maybe let me say even the lowest levels of our government system, we don't have, unfortunately, a lot of young, youthful participation. So it's still a lot of old people.
Okay, even though there's not that many old ones in
exactly.
Representation.
In that sense, representation of the youth in my country is unfortunately at a very low rate right now.
I can assume. Yeah, and if parties are not as such formidable, then it must be hard to gain access for these. I mean, in the end, it's also just an interest group. Yeah, the youth needs an interest participation. And that's unfortunate. But in general, would you say that there's now a more political interested youth growing? Maybe in your also, I mean, you are, I would say, still considered in the youth that in our age, is politics a big topic?
Yes, it is. It's just that I guess our weakness is in organization, if I may put it that way. Mobilizing ourselves has been the topic of conversation right now, because what's happening mostly is that when we do try to have certain lobbies or to impart change, we're shut down. And it's obviously because the structure of the system, the fact that it's a monarchy, there are quite a number of certain things that we can say and certain things that we cannot say. So our strategy, we're lacking in strategy, if I may put it that way.
Yeah.
To actually impart effective change at the moment. So young people know and want change, but they are maybe afraid of the repercussions or the consequences that come with
one big thing maybe to throw in this conversation also, how's the role of the media in that case? Because I see, for example, from the I think FFF, freedom fighters in South Africa, for example. I mean, they are very large in terms of media aggregation. And how is this situation like, maybe?
And unfortunately, our media representation is very limited. We don't have freedom of press. Probably it is cited within our constitution, but there are still a lot of things that limit us from saying a lot of things. So this is part of the problem. This is part of the problem. I mean, mostly the Swazi people are very respecting of the monarch and the tradition, and they understand, having a monarch in this modern era.
You have
quite people unique. That actually understand that construct,
Of course.
And they do understand it, but what they are mostly fighting for is transparency, inclusivity, maybe. Let me put it that way. We just want a better inclusive society.
Yeah. So gradual change and not system system breakdown. I mean, respecting the benefits also, I guess, from independence and other elements that the royal family has brought, right?
Yes.
I mean,
Yes, and of course there are obviously different types of groups. I mean, if we term the word change, there
yeah,
will be people that are more radical, who want a whole breakdown, and then
yeah,
there's
especially
who are
these young people, yeah, always
exactly
looking for a big revolution.
exactly, and then there's the ones who want to revolutionize at a gradual pace. I mean, I guess this is in any country globally. Yeah.
Definitely. And independent of wealth and other issues, there's always a larger demand. But I mean, that's probably the way to a solution. If you demand very radically, then it's much more likely that you will find a gradual compromise. And
Yeah.
to some extent, at least as long as the voices are heard, we are
Mhm.
looking forward. Yeah, but that was very very detailed for an internal politics aspect. Now, how is the maybe outside area regarding things like your neighboring countries, Mozambique, South Africa, or maybe the whole South African region? How's the network there for Eswatini?
You mean in terms of conflicts or just
Yeah, conflicts, or I don't know, like maybe some special border agreements or trade agreements, or is there some partner countries, you'd say, which are closer to Eswatini?
I mean, every country who normally mistakes us as being completely a part of South Africa, as if we're not a sovereign nation. I
Yeah,
guess it is. I mean, South Africa is almost like a big brother because
big brother.
they are mainly our main bilateral partner, if I may put it that way. And then multilaterally, we are partnered with SADC. So most of the things that we do are SADC oriented. So if
Yeah,
we're partnered with, for example, America and the EU, because based on SADC.
said.
Yes, yes. So regionally, because of SADC, then the countries that partner with SADC, naturally we partner with as well. But mainly it's South Africa, Botswana, Mozambique, of course. And actually, we have no friction with them because historically we've actually helped them. We're quite a peaceful country because we've never waged war outside of the very ancient tribal wars.
Yeah.
We've never waged war with any country in the modern era. We've only helped South Africans during the apartheid era, and we've also helped curb the refugee crisis that happened when Mozambicans kind of fled Mozambique because of their economic crisis there. So we have a large Mozambican population as well, and because of that, our relations with those countries are actually in good terms.
Oh.
And yes, I guess I guess our country is quite strategic in the way that it forms relations with certain countries, and it's quite interesting because we don't receive very dire repercussions if we partner with the outcasts of Africa, because we have, for example, had been in very good relations with the former Libyan President Gaddafi.
Okay, interesting.
Also the former Zimbabwean President Mugabe. They were very, bilaterally, I think with Swaziland, there was a lot of cooperation with them. But we never received a lot of friction from countries. And in that way, you can say we're a bit strategic because nobody will then say Swaziland is like this. We're still able to be friends with everyone.
So you get away with a lot of fooling around, to be simple. Yeah.
Around, I think, yes.
That's cool. Yeah. I assume from a Swazi position, then countries like Mugabe's Zimbabwe or Gaddafi's Libya seem a lot of more similar in terms of royal ruling than maybe others. So it might be
probably this is the reason why it was
similar problems. Yeah.
Yes. But you know, I guess also if you look at the ruling styles of those two countries and that pan-Africanist narrative, I guess Swaziland shares the same sentiments, and this is the reason why probably, you know, relations with those countries, you know, they were still in cooperation to some extent.
So it has this vision ahead, because something I learned from Edwin in our Burundi case was that there exist a variety of Pan-African ideas within Africa, like form first a smaller regional body and then expand, or something directly go to the large body. So there's some big thinking, although Swaziland has such a small land area, right?
Yes. We actually participate quite well in we hardly say no.
In the AU, you mean, or in the SADC?
Not just the SADC, but also, you know, in the AU as well. Our participation is quite neutral. We are never necessarily siding with just one part or looking at interests of just one side. We're quite neutral, actually. So we love participating in these integrative organizations, not all of these African integrating organizations.
Yeah, that's true. And some issue that maybe also supports that argument, which I found during my research. I was very surprised that until this day, it is the only country that within Africa still accepts Taiwan as an independent nation. And you know, that is something that, I mean, the civil society in many European countries still tries to keep up. Already, I think some governments, even in Europe, are starting to fall also on the side of being only recognizing one China. But that is also something very impressive for such a small nation to hold as a point. I'm really...
Yes, we do. We recognize Taiwan, and actually Taiwan is a bilateral, one of Swaziland's most important bilateral partners. So with the reason, I mean, obviously now because we're partnered with Taiwan, so we can't be partnered with China. So China has no influence within Swaziland, and it's only by their choice, you know, because Swaziland it wasn't either one side or the other, you know. It was more, we accept and recognize Taiwan, and it's not like then we want to stop relations with China. And I can imagine how that type of foreign policy could probably present itself with problems if you look at the fact that our neighbor South Africa is, you know, closely related with China. So
very closely, yeah. I think even more closely to many Europeans in comparison.
Yeah, I mean, they're part of BRICS together.
Exactly, you're right. Yeah.
It's kind of, you know, weird that we are closely partnered with Taiwan, and I can only hope that it won't present us with any problems in future in that type of foreign policy, because South Africa is our brother. So you know, I mean, I guess I think our relationship with Taiwan is increasing every year, is what I noticed.
Okay.
By virtue of the fact that we recognize them, they have quite a number of projects that they are heading within Swaziland, and there is a number. They give Swazi students scholarships as well. So they also have built schools, some medical schools in Swaziland as well. There's a very, very large population of Swazi people in Taiwan, not students, but also just expats. So yeah, we're really, really tied.
So I can assume then that the increase of Chinese activity and investment in basically all other African countries is seen a bit with concern or skepticism from Eswatini's perspective, right?
Yes, in a way it is. We are quite skeptical with that increase of Chinese activity, and I think because we are pro-Taiwanese, I guess we can term it pro-Taiwanese, then we are naturally going to be skeptics about Chinese activity. So and we will steer clear of them, but I do feel like if China were to approach Swaziland, the only fight or conflict that would arise would be from the Chinese and the Taiwanese government, rather than the Swazi government with either one of them. Because we've always held a neutral narrative. We don't side as a people. So
it's more or less neutral, yeah. But it's something that, especially from my podcast, drives me a lot. I'm part of why I'm doing this also is my fascination for the China and Africa project. It's a podcast I always recommend to get an understanding of the impact that now is increasing. And on the other hand, we must admit that China is doing a formidable job of creating a basic infrastructure, which is in the end what keeps Africa from development. I think in many parts that just the essential elements are missing, despite China maybe offering debt traps or other, let's say, minor risks. I think that to some extent still all this investment in Africa is needed. And if nobody else is giving it, then it's I think better than nothing, right? And compared to what the Europeans then always claim, or the West with their democratic attachments to any deal. Yeah, it's always a bit more difficult. But now, I mean, you are also an interesting case. I mean, you are studying now in Turkey, and I think other countries now I hear like India is introducing a large European plan, Japan and others. What would you say maybe is the impact or the connection with other major global countries from an Eswatini view, or maybe from your own view, living now in Turkey as an expert or studying there at least?
I guess we don't necessarily have a lot of relations outside of Europe, if I may say, as well as America and even Latin America with like Brazil as well.
Okay.
And so then you can see that the foreign policy is really in a sense guided by maybe how South Africa is also approaching certain things. The only thing that we differ with is China and maybe possibly the Arab Peninsula, because we are also quite closely related with countries like Qatar. So we have some Arab Peninsula bilateral relations as well.
Okay.
So mostly those are the countries we normally relate with, are similar to the ones that South Africa does as well. And I guess it's because of our economies being so intertwined. Because if you look at the fact that we get 90% of our imports from South Africa.
90%? Wow. I thought maybe there's some more Mozambique influence or something. No?
We get mostly from South Africa, and then 70% of our exports go to South Africa. So they are also like importing a large number of stuff from us as well. So
wow, yeah, that's a high dependency.
The rhetoric we then need to follow is who do we, as an intertwined economy in some way, who do we choose to relate with outside of it only makes sense from an economical perspective to have relations with Europe and America, Latin America, and the Arab Peninsula.
Interesting. And Turkey is not a case. Or maybe out of curiosity, how did you get the idea or the plan to go to Turkey? I mean, it's also a very fascinating contrast, I think.
Yes, yes. It is a fascinating contrast, especially because actually the Turkey and Swazi relations were actually are not really, really high. Like, we don't relate at a very large scale. But the way, I mean, the Turkish government scholarships, for example, they are heard of everywhere in the continent of Africa. That's how they are also making themselves known, that, hey, listen,
Soft power, yeah? It's a perfect way, I guess. I mean,
perfect soft power, absolutely. So, with following the Turkish scholarship, which I guess I can say, around about 6 years ago, maybe, that's when mostly the Turkish government scholarship got to be known in Swaziland.
Yeah.
And following that, that's when now, our, I think maybe 3 years ago or 2 years ago, that's the only time we appointed a consulate to.
So first came the students, and then came diplomatic relations in that sense.
Yes, actually, we obviously had a consulate general in Swaziland for Turkey, but we never had any representation in Turkey. So, and also because we're such a small country, you find that we only have one embassy. The current one, who is the European, who represents Europe and Eurasia, is in Brussels, Belgium. So he actually visited Turkey probably in 2015, if I'm not mistaken. So this is where first the students came, and then
and beautiful. That's how it's done. Yeah.
That recognition, so I think they're well on their way to getting even more related, because there are some businessmen now who are traveling to Swaziland, and also Swazi businessmen coming to Turkey as well. So actually, the scholarship initiated a number of things.
And I mean, see yourself, or I always have this example with Chandre, or also Edwin Becker and others. I mean, people, I think, tend to forget studying in Turkey doesn't mean, okay, you go there, do your English bachelor's. You actually study in Turkish, right? So you got a completely 1 year pre-program to become fluent in Turkish, and by that fact, you will always have that skill. And I think, for the Turkish perspective, that is a very large a form of access then later on to maybe Swaziland, if they know that at least already one political expert they can contact, right? I mean, it's a big potential for the Turkish Eswatini future, or the Turkish African future relations.
Absolutely. I mean, there are a number. There's very few students now that they were, at first they were taking our students for medicine and engineering and nobody in the political field. But if you look at it, really, with me being in Turkey and knowing the Turkish language the way I do, I mean, that's going to increase relations even further with
definitely. Unfortunately, it's such a single nation language. I mean, you will have a perfect time always in Europe, especially in Germany, in my area of Germany, West Germany. It's very beneficial, I guess, at least for going out or getting food and these types. But it is unfortunately only speaking within Turkey. But it's a beautiful language, and I think already it opens up many new perspectives. When you look on the, I guess it would be nice if Turkey as itself would be more open, maybe as a society, to African population, because it's probably still a process. Yeah, it's still.
I think it's still a process, especially with the southern region, because if you look at how they relate to our brothers in the north and the northeast, with respect to the southern region.
Oh, you mean a Southern African region?
Southern African region,
okay.
Yes.
So the Christian region.
Yes. Wow. That way. I was being very diplomatic about
Thank
it.
you. All the blame on me. I already named the podcast Afrika for Almans, so
Yes.
nobody can blame me of anti-Turkish
Yes.
sentiments.
Absolutely, but even the scholarship program itself, there are certain. If you look at the numbers that are the intake that comes from the southern region, it's percentage-wise, it's much less than the north.
Yeah. So.
And they will obviously say, it's according to applications and that quota, how many people applied, then that's how they calculate it. But the relations as a whole between Turkey and the southern hemisphere, I think right now are very much in the private sector.
Okay, that's maybe also a good question of mine. Is there a private sector as such, or what would you say is like the largest sector of industry, or maybe production-wise? What would you say you would identify as the biggest products or sectors in Eswatini?
Well, we have. Well, in terms of our largest sector is our agricultural sector.
True, you mentioned that. You're right. Yeah.
We are the country that is supplying Africa with sugar.
Sugar. All right,
Yes.
Sugar Rock. Yeah, there you go.
Yes. We have a lot of sugar. We obviously also have other raw materials and minerals such as gold and diamonds and iron ore as well. And but some of them are in much smaller deposits such as nickel and what. The largest very reserves are with asbestos and I think iron ore as well. But due to maybe corruption and maybe the government not really taking the lead in how these mines are administered, we've had a decline in our mining industry, which previously is actually what catapulted us. But during the colonial era, it didn't really catapult us, because then King Sobhuza decided to close our reserves because they were being mismanaged. Some things were being stolen, our gold and our diamonds. So they were closed and they were put away as the mines of the wealth of the country, they term it in my language. So they were closed down. And what's been opened, but more on a private sector, is the iron ore mining industry, as well as the asbestos mining industry.
Iron ore? Sorry if I interrupt. Iron, I can understand, but iron ore? What exactly is this? Let me just... Iron ore? Huh. Maybe in German I need to... O-R-E, you say, right? Iron O-R-E? Iron ore. Ah, okay. Deutsch. Sorry for the small interruption, but it's mostly raw materials then that are Eisenerz. Okay, Eisenerz. Now I understand. Sorry for the small gap. Eisenerz. It's also a mining product, yeah. And what about maybe how do you say not raw materials? What's the opposite? Like, is there also some sort of a supply chain that is taking place, maybe with your example of sugar, or are there most of the raw materials directly leaving Eswatini?
Well, there is a supply chain. The iron ore is processed and made into iron. So is the asbestos.
Okay.
And So we previously actually closed our forestry sector. We were actually a hub for paper. So we were supplying a lot of countries with paper. We had a lot of pulp because actually near the Great Lesotho River, there is a region with a large forests. So that had a lot of pulp there, and we were supplying quite a number of countries with pulp. So we were also processing some of these materials, and that's the supply chain actually did exist. Especially in sugar. We don't just give them sugar cane.
Okay, nice.
Yes. we have,
So some refineries and these
brown sugar, golden brown sugar, white sugar.
Some value is added, I hope, then.
Exactly. In fact, that is the backbone of the country is the sugarcane industry, asbestos as well, and textile, because we've got cotton fields. Yeah, we've got cotton fields as well. And textile is a huge thing for us also. But because, right now, previously a lot of European countries were getting textile and sugar from us, and then they kind of changed, supplies to the Asian market.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's much bigger need, and with shipping going so quick and cheap. Unfortunately, I just read a statistic that internal African shipping versus like a shipping from one harbor to the end of the world, it's in many cases much more expensive.
Exactly.
So going to Asia.
This is the problem that we face, but we are still supplying a large number of European countries with sugar.
That's
Latin American countries, and so that's working in our favor. Our sugar industry is quite good, but obviously because of Southern Africa has been experiencing some drought seasons, and those things have been
it's a big dependency, if the natural resources, or at least the production on natural fields, is the major economic backbone, then you are exposed to these dangers. It's
yes. Yeah.
That's a big risk. And what about maybe foreign companies, or like maybe in the service sector, or like in other areas of business? Would you say it's a more or less business friendly environment?
Yes, it is. It is a business friendly environment. But there hasn't been a very large, let me say, foreign investment. I think a lot of because South Africa is bigger and it's a bigger economy.
Yeah.
So a lot of foreign investors tend to want the cream of the crop. So we don't have a large foreign investment is not, unfortunately, very, very high. But what normally tends to happen is that after having discovered South Africa, foreign investment then discovers Swaziland, because now they know. And mostly the foreign investment that I can maybe say has been there in the country is because of the relations with our former colonial powers. So if there is foreign investment, it's from Britain, or it's
so it might be a problem of information, maybe not as much as attractiveness or something. So it's just maybe a lack of knowledge on the other side. What potential there could be.
Yes, what potentials there could be. I think it is lack of information, or if not lack of information, it's also, geographically, we are placed in similarly with Lesotho, where we are countries within sort of a country.
Yeah.
So a lot of, when you look at it geostrategically, it's not necessarily something that is attractive to.
Yeah, it's just a +1 maybe to some market like Southern Africa. Yeah,
exactly.
That's an issue. And maybe one last thing of economy. What is the perception of Germany, or like maybe German companies, or is there some way of like representation, or like do you know about local ideas or existence of German products, or the Germany as such? Is there what would you describe as the image within Eswatini?
Well, the image, because of the partnership with the European Union, I mean, basically, then if we don't look at Germany just as Germany as a whole.
Yeah,
we look at Germany part of the
picture.
European Union. So if we are to refer to Germany, we refer to it as all bunched in European Union, and you know, that's how we relate with Germany. So the products, because we do have certain products that come from European Union, so we have different types, and some of them are Dutch, some of them are German, some of them are French, you know, so it's a mixture really, and it's because of European Union, and also because I guess of the customs and laws that govern the European Union and Germany. When you relate with other countries, you have to relate as European Union as well.
True. It's one common market. I mean, if you have an agreement within your shared common market, then it doesn't make sense to do it individually or bilateral. I guess that's also the same with South Africa, if I understand you correctly. If they have a trade partner, it's going to be yours as well, right? Like
it's like that. That's how SADC is. Just as European Union is, SADC is exactly the same. So we also have that common market, and we've formed that sort of. Yeah.
Okay, then maybe to conclude this part, what do you see in the future of SADC? Do you think it's maybe out of a Eswatini perspective? I'm sure they would want to go into further integration, but what do you see maybe as a future scenario of SADC? Will it go a path where, I mean, we have in Europe now take things like free movement. Okay, I think you also have now open border as such, or like free movements of labor and things like a shared currency. Are those scenarios that you assume as likely to happen soon in SADC?
Well, SADC was probably going to go through stages such as maybe a common currency, but maybe not as soon as now. I mean, Swaziland and South Africa already share currency.
It's the same. Okay, so the rand is also in Swaziland.
And then Botswana is maybe slightly higher, you know, but our currencies going in the SADC region, they're not very far from each other, except, you know, Malawi is a bit, is the one that has the lowest rate. I think if in future we were probably going to integrate even tighter, because we've always held each other. And I think Swaziland is Swaziland because we're held together by our regional neighbors as well. Those economies and our economy all together in a cycle, we actually hold each other. So we want to integrate even much more at a larger scale. But I think now, because there are talks of integrating Africa as a whole.
Yeah.
So that I feel is going to disturb maybe the rhetoric that was in place of integrating Southern Hemisphere, Southern Africa, you know.
So making the second step before the first step, so to say, in a way.
Yes. So I do feel like probably things such as having a common currency, those are things I think that will be disputed much more. And because now the African Union wants to have a common market, opening those borders to even other countries, larger countries, that's going to disturb any talks that were being made to further integrate the SADC region. So I'm not saying the SADC region, the future of the SADC region is not bright. I think we act also how we're acting towards the common market of Africa as a whole. We're also acting with a regional perspective, you know.
Yeah.
So, probably we will grow, but our integration will be at a slower rate because we also are trying to integrate with the rest of the continent at the moment.
It is. I mean, fortunately and unfortunately, it's a gigantic landscape, and even I struggle a lot with trying to identify all these diverse and unique countries within that. So I mean, at least let's hope that SADC gets. Is there the area's fixed now, right? With SADC, it's like it's everything below, let's say maybe Tanzania, Congo, Kinshasa, and Congo Brazzaville, right?
Yes. Everything below that, it's quite fixed.
Okay, so there's no expansion as such that the people in Europe face now with going even further to the east or so. So the countries are there, and now the question is just how much they integrate within each other.
Yes. Which I feel like actually we've reached some point of integration. Actually, we're at a good point of integration, but because, for example, okay, it's not all countries that are permitted for rights of free movement, for example, because maybe of war security measures.
Yeah.
You know, for example, going to Congo, there still are visa things that have to be done with that. But other countries where there are no security risks, we have free movement within SADC region. You know, we've actually integrated quite well, but it's just further deepening and actually calling ourselves maybe having a southern identity, kind of how Europe is now sort of beginning.
Let's hope it goes the right way, but you know, every step takes a step back and 2 steps further. So
that's true.
That is the danger. Now, and maybe to come to the last point, because I mean, we have talked a lot about the country, but also you are the representative in that case. And something I always find very interesting with people leaving their home for a longer period of time. I try to do it myself as much as studies and other things led me. But maybe how did your perception of Eswatini or maybe also SADC change through your studies abroad? Did you see things with a different eye?
Yes, it changed dramatically actually. When I was at home, I think I can say I didn't have a lot of exposure. You know, I wanted, you know, that when you're at home, when you're within your borders, you yearn for more, and you're like, I just want to get out of here.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to really deal with all the problems that you see happening around you, which I mean, every country has its problems, but that lack of exposure made me, when I was at home, not as patriotic as I am now, which is very dramatic. It was a very dramatic shift.
Yeah. Now you are forced to represent your country indirectly, at least. Yeah, you are becoming a small ambassador, technically.
Exactly. And now I love my country and where I come from, and that's, I think it had a positive effect on my view. It made me be like, home is where I want to be actually, ultimately. After pursuing my studies, and where I want to impart change is home. Home is better for me.
Yeah.
So I'm actually more patriotic. I'm more nationalistic, which is.
We have to be careful with that word in German context, but I think in a positive country loving, or at least that your feelings are directed to the best of your home. Yeah, it's something people lose, I think, after a certain time, that they don't want to do anything in favor of their nation anymore, or these kind of things that when too much individualism comes in, then these get lost, these noble motives, I think. Yeah.
Yes, this is the part that I thought maybe I would have lost, but in it, you know, I found new love for my country.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Would you maybe? I mean, I at least am already fascinated, and will at some point for sure see Eswatini. I'm very sure this will happen, as much as I would love to see many other places in Africa. But maybe to give some still doubtful touristic listeners now some idea, or what is your favorite place, or maybe your place that you would advise the most within Eswatini for a person to visit?
Well, there is this place called Nkonyeni.
Nkonyeni, okay.
It's actually a golf estate, but it's more than just a golf estate. It's also like a nature reserve of some sort, but not with animals, because it's more of nature reserve in terms of plants and flowers and stuff, and it's absolutely breathtaking. It's actually my best place to ever go to when I'm at home. And we also then have our nature reserve parks, because Swaziland is landlocked, so we do a lot of hiking. There's a lot of hiking. So if you love hiking,
perfect.
Then Swaziland is the place where you gotta go. And if you love barbecuing and seeing a lot of different wildlife, Swaziland is the place to be, because we've got a number of interesting nature reserve parks, like Mlilwane, and another one is Sane. Those are our best touristic areas, I think, as well as hiking the big granite Sibebe Rock.
Yeah, the big star rock. Okay, we put the rock in the links. The flower place. You just send me those, and I'll put them in the show notes so the people can see for themselves. Yeah.
And then Swaziland likes showing off its traditional roots. So we also have the traditional village. I will send you all of the links. We also have a museum that's dedicated to King Sobhuza II, who ruled the country for a very long time. It's in the heart of Swaziland, where we have our legislative capital, Lobamba. It's actually also an interesting place to look at the very ancient artifacts and look at the pictures of some of our ancient kings and exactly where we come from. So it's very close to where our traditional village is, where you get to see how even some of our population is still living today, but you know, it's mostly conserved for people to see how we lived before modernization and all of that stuff. Those are the best places to see.
Perfect. Yeah, I think we covered pretty much all chapters of mine, and even all additional ones I came through. And I think if anyone out there feels curious or has some more questions I will just guide them to you. I mean, you are reachable over social media platforms as normal, Facebook, Instagram, and I thank you very much. I hope then we'll see each other next time in Ankara, or who knows, maybe by the end of your studies I'll make it down there. And I thank you very much for joining us today, and looking forward to hear you on again.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much. See you. İyi akşamlar. Teşekkür ederim canım.
Yes, so much.